Have you ever been there? Lying awake, your mind just cycling through worries about bills or dreams you've put on hold, and you have this biting sense of scarcity.
Hmm.
That painful paradox, right? You're capable, you're smart, but true, consistent abundance just feels frustratingly out of reach.
It is an almost universal human experience, and the immediate thought is always, I just have to work harder. Or that you're missing something, some external resource.
But we're going to push back on that idea today.
We are.
Our mission in this deep dive is to get past that traditional advice. We want to show you that the path to attracting sustained wealth isn't about luck or just sheer brute force.
No, it's about gently but very precisely tapping into the power of your own mind. And we're going to look at it all through the reliable lens of neuroscience.
That's the key.
It is. The central thesis we've pulled from the sources is this. Your subconscious mind isn't just like a storage closet for memories. It is a vast programmable network, a network of neural pathways that's directing maybe 95% of your reality every day.
95%. Wow.
So this whole deep dive is about how simple, consistent repetition, and this is a technique validated by biological science, can literally rewire those pathways to attract wealth.
And this isn't philosophy. It's based on neuroplasticity.
Exactly. The brain's proven ability to reorganize itself to form new connections, throughout your entire life, it can be changed.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Let's start with the science, with where most people are stuck.
Yeah.
The default wiring. Why do we default to scarcity?
It comes down to survival,
Right.
Plain and simple. For millions of years, the brain's priority has been safety, not abundance.
Right.
And your subconscious operates through these automatic patterns. We call them paradigms. They're basically just pre-installed behavior programs.
And they're formed from everything, right? Every experience, every message of lack you heard growing up.
Everything. So if your past is full of messages about scarcity, your brain has laid down physical, actual paths, a scarcity groove for how to react to money.
Okay, so these aren't metaphors. You're saying these are actual physical circuits in the brain.
Precisely. Well-worn circuits that cause automatic limiting behaviors. You see it as, hesitation on big opportunities or chronic underselling of your own worth.
Or that cycle of getting out of debt just to fall right back in.
That's a classic one. And it is so crucial for you to realize this isn't a moral failing. It's not a lack of intelligence. It is just your biology running on obsolete instructions.
Let's get more specific then. What parts of the brain are actually cementing that scarcity loop?
We can point to two key areas. First, you have the amygdala. Think of it as the brain's alarm center.
The fear center.
Exactly. So every time a financial risk comes up, or even when you just think about a bill, the amygdala flares up. It triggers stress and fear.
And the second?
The hippocampus. It stores those emotional memories, and it cements the association between money and high anxiety.
So it's a vicious circle. The emotional response from the amygdala reinforces the memory in the hippocampus,
Yeah.
which then reinforces the whole paradigm.
Yes.
How do you break it?
Well, the change begins with something that sounds simple, but is neurologically profound. It's intentional awareness.
And this is where neuroplasticity comes back in.
It does. We recommend you start by journaling your recurring money thoughts. Not for, catharsis, but for neurological observation.
That's fascinating. So the simple act of writing the thought down, what does that do?
It activates your prefrontal cortex, your brain's executive function, the CEO, basically.
Correct.
And the prefrontal cortex steps in, and it observes that reactive emotional surge coming from the amygdala. This process creates a space, a gap between the stimulus, the bill, the fear, and the automatic scarcity response.
And that gap is the doorway.
That space is the doorway. It's
Mhm.
where the conscious mind starts to overrule the automated programs.
And then the tool we use to build a new pathway in that space is repetition.
Yes, repetition. Neuroscience calls it long-term potentiation, or LTP. It's the cellular process where the connections between neurons, the synapses, get stronger when they're activated over and over again.
It's that famous saying, right? Neurons that fire together wire together.
That's it. That's the biological basis for everything we're talking about.
Which brings us perfectly to our first big example, Thomas Edison. A guy who mastered this intuitive rewiring long before we could ever measure LTP in a lab.
Oh, absolutely. Edison's early life was a textbook case of scarcity. Born into a modest family, minimal schooling, he was even labeled addled by his teachers because he was so curious.
And he had huge failures early on. Lab fires, financial ruin.
Spectacular flops. But he seemed to intuitively understand this power of repetition and mental programming. He didn't just work hard, he worked smart with his brain chemistry.
And the sources point to his habit of daily napping.
Yes, those naps, or just periods of conscious relaxation, they're now linked to accessing theta brainwaves.
And the theta waves are important because
They're associated with deep creativity, with learning, and with the subconscious mind. It's the ideal state for bypassing your own conscious critic, that scarcity voice, and installing new ideas directly.
So he was literally programming his brain while he was resting.
Mm-hmm.
What else did he do? Kind of repetitions.
He used affirmations of persistence constantly. We all know the quote, genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration.
Sure.
But that wasn't just, a motivational poster. It was an autosuggestion, a
That's
command to his brain for self-discipline and immunity to failure.
So that repetition was physically strengthening the synaptic links in his prefrontal cortex, the parts dedicated to problem solving and resilience.
Precisely. And that consistent mental focus built such powerful pathways that he began to attract investors, partners, the resources he needed. And the result was, lighting up New York City with the Pearl Street Station.
An unimaginable fortune.
Billions in modern wealth. He turned a repeated mental vision into physical reality.
I think that idea of energy flow is so critical. The sources describe the subconscious not just as a storage unit, but as a dynamo, an energy field of bioelectric pulses.
With kilowatts of potential power. And if our paradigms are negative, we're essentially blocking that massive energy flow.
You have to harness that thought energy and consciously direct it.
Yes. And that is where focused emotional visualization comes in. And our perfect example here is Henry Ford.
And Ford's early career, it makes Edison's look like a walk in the park.
Right. Left school at 15, failed spectacularly, went bankrupt twice.
And was mocked by his own backers for wanting to build a car for the common person.
But he didn't dwell on those failures. Instead, he used daily focused visualization. He repeated the vision of affordable cars everywhere. It was less about wishing and more about simulating reality in his mind.
And that simulation is where the neuroscience just gets incredible.
Yeah.
When we visualize with emotion, we're not just using our visual cortex, we're activating the brain's reward pathways.
You are. And that activation releases dopamine.
The motivation molecule.
It's not just for pleasure. It's the ultimate motivation fuel. By visualizing the Model T's success, Ford was chemically motivating his brain to pursue it, to build the assembly line, to bypass the amygdala's warnings.
And his famous affirmation, whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right.
That was his way of constantly reinforcing that dopamine-fueled pathway. And look at the result. It wasn't just personal wealth. He tripled his workers' wages. He created widespread abundance because his subconscious was aligned with it.
This really answers that deeply frustrating question, doesn't it? Why do smart, capable people so often stay broke?
It comes down to the basal ganglia.
The autopilot.
Exactly. It's the part of the brain that controls deeply ingrained habits. So even if your conscious intellect is brilliant, if your autopilot is wired for fear, you will filter out opportunities. They'll seem too risky.
You just won't even see them.
You won't. You need repetition to overwrite the basal ganglia's default settings. Which brings us to Andrew Carnegie.
A man who had every possible reason to be trapped by a scarcity paradigm forever.
Extreme poverty. A Scottish immigrant working as a bobbin boy for $1.20 a week. His circumstances should have cemented a scarcity mindset.
But instead, he intentionally devoured books on philosophy and success. He was repeating principles of self-discipline daily.
He was proactively building neural resilience, and that focus did something critical. It activated his reticular activating system, the RAS.
The RAS. Remind us what that is.
Think of it as your brain's internal search engine, or a filter. It filters the billions of bits of data you get every day, and it only shows you what's relevant to your repeated thoughts.
So if you're constantly repeating thoughts of lack, your RAS literally hides opportunities from you.
Yes. But if you're Carnegie, repeating thoughts of discipline and industrial success, your RAS suddenly tunes you into the potential of railroads and, later, the steel industry.
He saw opportunities others just couldn't perceive.
Absolutely. It led to Carnegie Steel, which he sold for what would be over $15 billion today. And he completed that cycle by giving 90% of it away.
And Carnegie is the one who commissioned Napoleon Hill.
He did. And Hill, who faced financial ruin himself during the Depression, used these very principles, autosuggestion, repeated affirmations, to rebuild his entire life, proving the technique works no matter what's happening outside.
So Hill's work really just confirms that core insight. Desire plus faith plus consistent repetition. That's the formula.
That is the mechanism that programs the subconscious. The key is committing to the repetition.
And we really have to emphasize, this power goes so far beyond just financial goals. It is a biological tool for overcoming profound limitations.
Look at the case of Helen Keller, blind and deaf at 19 months. Her world was, effectively locked down. Financial and social independence seemed impossible.
A physical impossibility.
Yet her teacher, Anne Sullivan, used relentless, consistent repetition of fingerspelling, day in, day out. And that created new compensatory neural maps. It literally rewired Keller's brain to process language.
Which allowed her to graduate from Radcliffe, author books, become this global figure. It's just an irrefutable example of neuroplasticity driven by repetition.
Or think of Marie Curie. Facing political and gender oppression, extreme scientific hardship. She didn't have one sudden breakthrough. She repeatedly conducted painstaking experiments day after day.
That sustained, repetitive focus on a goal.
It built the internal capacity to discover radium and polonium. She won 2 Nobel Prizes, attracted global funding, and created this incredible legacy.
This also really highlights the role of imagination in all of this. Albert Einstein is the ultimate example.
Right. A guy who struggled in school, failed exams, couldn't get a job. He wasn't relying on logic to start his revolution.
He's using thought experiments.
He was. He repeatedly visualized complex scenarios. That mental imagery built dense neural connections that allowed him to see reality differently. He said, logic will get you from A to B. Imagination will take you everywhere. That's the subconscious visualization process.
So, for you listening today, what's the practical outflow of this? What happens when your brain is consistently tuned to opportunity through repetition?
Well, the primary outflow is diversification, specifically the pursuit of multiple sources of income, or MSIs. The wealthy don't just stumble into this. Their brains, tuned by a constant focus on potential, just naturally spot and act on varied opportunities.
Opportunities that a scarcity-minded person's RAS would just filter out as a distraction or a risk.
Or a risk, exactly. So the peak insight here really is a matter of pure commitment. You have these phenomenal mental faculties. The power is already there.
But the rewiring process isn't automatic.
No. You have to make the decision, the commitment to daily repetition, visualization, journaling, affirmations, whatever it is, to ensure those neural shifts actually happen.
It's the consistent application that matters. I'm thinking of the modern example of Proctor, who was struggling financially until he just committed to repeating these recordings detailing principles of success.
That consistent intake literally altered his limiting paradigms and allowed him to build a global business.
And we see it overcoming the deepest odds. Look at Oprah Winfrey, turning profound childhood trauma and poverty into one of the world's biggest media empires.
Her commitment to repeatedly affirming her self-worth and future vision, it leveraged her brain's neuroplasticity to override the fear wiring from that trauma. Her success is a victory of focused repetition over entrenched biology.
So, in closing, the scientific truth is this. Your subconscious mind, when you nurture it with focused emotional repetition, is the engine that attracts abundance.
That commitment, like water eroding rock over time, will inevitably shift those old limiting scarcity pathways. It has to.
So we'll leave you with a final thought to carry with you. Based on the neuroscience we've explored, the amygdala, the basal ganglia, the power of LTP, what is one specific area of scarcity, one limiting belief that you will intentionally target with repetition starting tonight?
It could be journaling, visualization, and affirmation. Just know that your brain is biologically engineered for this change. Commit to that single, simple act of mental repetition.